be sure to check out Rob Plays. There you can hang out with me while we play video games and talk about life stuff. So with the announcement that he'll be added to the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. cast in Season 4, what I want to do here is have a discussion about the all-new Ghost Rider, Robbie Reyes. And what I'm hoping is that at the end of all this, you'll have a stronger understanding of his character, as well as what he's about, ahead of his appearance in the show later this fall. And so in the notes following all-new Ghost Rider number 1, we learned that Robbie Reyes was actually the brainchild of the book's editor, Mark Paniccia, who wanted to rebuild the character and take a significant leap forward. And citing earlier changes, such as transforming Ghost Rider from a Western-style character that wore a cowboy hat and rode a horse to a biker with a flaming skull, Paniccia wanted to take the next step in the character's evolution and draw inspiration from his love of classic cars. Enlisting the services of Philippe Smith to flesh out the concept of the character, hoping that Smith's background in non-superhero comics would lead to an unconventional approach to the character, Smith made the decision to give the new Ghost Rider series a different feel than most of the Marvel books by choosing Los Angeles for the setting, and alongside artist Tradd Moore, came up with the concept designs for the character as we know him. So Robbie Reyes made his debut in all-new Ghost Rider number 1 in May of 2014, written by Philippe Smith and drawn by Tradd Moore. And in addition to being a high school student and working after school in a garage and body shop, Robbie's also responsible for being the sole caretaker of his handicapped younger brother named Gabe. During this time and on his way home from work, Robbie sees his brother being tormented by a group of teenage thugs that have pushed him out of his wheelchair. Enraged, Robbie punches one of the gang members in retaliation, but finds himself staring down the barrel of a pistol pointed at his forehead by Garrow, the gang's leader. Now, while Robbie is not shot, he does suffer a beating at the hands of the gang before they leave with Gabe's wheelchair. And so following this, Robbie's devotion to his little brother becomes the driving force behind his character, and his desire to get Gabe out of the current situation leads Robbie to borrow a car from the garage where he worked and enter into a street race with a cash prize of $50,000 to the winner. Now, while he's racing, Robbie's car is pursued by a helicopter and several other cars, and where Robbie does find himself at a dead end and surrenders to what he believes to be the local law enforcement, he finds out the men inside the vehicle actually draw their guns and kill Robbie instead. And so while the men retrieve their bags full of pink pills from the trunk of their car and set fire to it, after they leave, Robbie seemingly gets up, but we also learn that his skull is made of metal and is completely engulfed in flames. In addition to this, Robbie is able to get back into the car and actually pursues the men who murdered him. And while Robbie does manage to run some of them over, most make it back to their destination, the lab of a man named Dr. Zabo, who, after realizing that one of the bag pills is missing, transforms into a monster named Mr. Hyde and kills the captain of his troops before sending the rest to recover the missing bag. Now, following this, Robbie wakes up the next day believing that his death and seeming resurrection had all been a dream. However, he notices that one of his eyes has turned orange, and his face is miraculously healed from the beating he took at the hands of the gang the previous day, in addition to bearing a mysterious marking on his face. When he returns to work, he also finds that the car that he raced has no signs of damage, and when Robbie attempts to take the car out that evening, he's confronted by members of a gang that serve a drug dealer named Grumpy, the owner of the car. After this, they start shooting, but Robbie's saved once again when he transforms into the man with a flaming skull, who fights off the thugs before getting in the car and driving away. And so once he stops, Robbie gets out of the car and finds that he's transformed back into his normal self, but also sees a flaming skull in the reflection of the car. Where Robbie begins to talk to the skull, the man tells him that he's the spirit of a guy named Eli Morrow, who's been murdered, and that he and Robbie are now eternally bonded. In addition to this, he promises to give Robbie the ability to fight back against those who would have wronged him, the men who basically killed him, and the thugs who bullied his brother, and even his parents who abandoned him, leaving him the responsibility of caring for his brother. In addition to this, Eli goes on to explain that not only would he and Robbie be bonded if Robbie would trust him, but that both of them would also be bonded to the car. Now, after some hesitation, Robbie agrees to trust Eli, hoping to gain the power to make a better life for himself and Gabe. Following this, once Robbie's bonded with Eli, Eli continues to attempt to influence him to solve his problems through violence, where Eli constantly reinforces the belief that people are bad and the only way to really change the city is to burn it down and start over. Eventually, a gang war breaks out between Grumpy's gang and Mr. Hyde's paramilitary forces, who've enlisted Guerro's gang as informants. With Grumpy eventually taking a handful of Zabo's pills and transforming into a hulking monster who's able to fight off Robbie in his Ghost Rider form, he ultimately finds himself ripped in two during a fight with Mr. Hyde. The next day, Zabo's troops attempt to hunt down the rest of Grumpy's gang, and the school bus that Gabe is riding in is caught up in the crossfire. As a result, Robbie arrives on the scene and begins to fight Mr. Hyde, who remarks that he remembers Robbie, but his smell is different, and that he's unskilled and weak and can't possibly be Ghost Rider. And so in a state state of confusion, Robbie asks Eli what Hyde is talking about, but Eli claims to have no idea. And so as Mr. Hyde finds himself unable to finish off Robbie, he takes a handful of pink pills and begins to overdose on the drug and turn back into Mr. Zabo. With Zabo neutralized, Robbie leaves the scene and we see him later confront Garrow and his gang. However, in a turn of phrase from what we'd seen earlier, they tell him how impressed they were by his victory over Hyde, but without responding to them, Robbie knocks them unconscious and takes back Gabe's wheelchair. So following the introduction of Robbie Reyes and his origin story, going into his ongoing series as it was written, the dichotomy between Eli and Robbie increases in that Eli consistently urges Robbie to take up a life of vigilantism and rid the world of people who don't deserve to live and whose presence is a drain on society. Robbie, however, is more concerned with earning money in street races in order to work fewer hours at the body shop so he can spend more time with Gabe, who's showing tremendous progress in his development. At the same time, Mr. Hyde had perfected a new and improved version of his drug in the form of the blue pill that allowed him enhanced abilities, in addition to attempting to distribute his drug to unite the gangs of Los Angeles under his control. Following this, and when Robbie hears of a race with a $50,000 purse that's out of state, he competes and he is successful in winning. However, when his opponent offers him the chance to go double or nothing the next day, while he takes it, his chances of winning are ruined by mutated animals that have ingested Mr. Hyde's defective pills and attack Robbie. And so losing the race, Eli encourages Robbie to track down the man who beat him and take back the money he rightfully should have won. And so from here, Robbie runs the man off the road and accidentally kills him, and while he laments, he's approached by Ghost Rider Johnny Blaze. Now after a brief struggle, Johnny looks inside the soul of Eli and reveals him to be a murderer and a Satanist, as well as a former Russian mobster that had taken as many as 52 lives and dismembered many of his victims for use in satanic rituals. And so following this, Eli escapes and eventually is able to take full control of Robbie's body after Robbie passes out from exhaustion. Now where Eli goes to Robbie's house and begins ripping up the floorboards to find a box he had left there while he had been alive, inside it's revealed the name and address of a man named Yegor Ivanov, a mob boss that Eli vows to take revenge on. Now while this is happening, Johnny Blaze continues to pursue Eli, and we learn that since he's not committed to avenging the innocent or make the wicked repent, that Eli Morrow, although similar in appearance to his choice of chain as a weapon, is not a true Ghost Rider. Instead, once Johnny Blaze catches up with Eli at Yegor's club, the two begin to fight, and Johnny subjects Eli to the penance stare, which makes him feel the pain and torment that he'd caused over his previous victims, and the pain is so severe that Eli actually leaves Robbie's body. Now at this point, Johnny tells Robbie that Eli's spirit thrives on Robbie's anger and negative feelings, and that if he gives into those feelings, Eli will take full control once again. However, unbeknownst to Robbie, Garrow had traveled to the club owned by Mr. Hyde to apprehend Ivanov, and overheard the entire conversation, finding out that Robbie was the Ghost Rider that had beaten him up. And so following this, Robbie loses control after Garrow confronts him at school, and Eli takes over yet again. However, after beating up Garrow's gang, Eli remains firmly in control of Robbie's body. During this time, when his teacher Mr. Wakeford comes to his home to check on him after the fight, Eli attempts to kill him, but Robbie is able to retain enough control to stop him, after which he punches the teacher and instructs him to never come back out of fear that he won't be able to hold Eli off for any measure of time. And so where Eli continues to remain in Robbie's mind, constantly tempting him to give in to his anger and step over the line so that he can continue to take control over his body and satisfy his bloodlust, as Robbie and Gabe grow further apart, Eli tries to enrage Robbie by revealing to him that he was actually Robbie's uncle Elias, and that he had pushed Robbie's mother down the stairs when she was pregnant with Gabe, which led to his disability. Now where this fails to sufficiently enrage Robbie, Eli begins to manipulate Gabe and eventually take over his body as well, leading him to finally take revenge on Ivanov once and for all. Now after this, Robbie follows them and is able to convince Gabe to shut out Eli's influence and reconcile with Robbie, but the reunion is short-lived when Ivanov pulls out a gun on Gabe and threatens to kill him. Before he has a chance to pull the trigger, however, Robbie kills Ivanov and in doing so, forms a permanent bond with Eli, after which Eli vows to eat away at Robbie's soul, but Robbie strikes a deal with him. In order to satisfy Eli's desire for blood, Robbie will allow Eli to find the most degenerate people he can, murderers, rapists, and torturers, people like himself, and Robbie will kill them. And so where Eli accepts the deal, the two remain linked together, which actually goes into the run or into the start of Secret Wars by Jonathan Hickman. Now following Secret Wars, the Marvel Universe was recreated as an entirely new line of comics that were launched with issue number 1s in late of 2015. While Robbie Reyes was initially absent from this new universe, it was revealed the following year that Marvel would be releasing a slate of new series in the fall of 2016, including Ghost Rider by Philippe Smith and artist Danilo Beyruth in November, closely coinciding with Robbie's appearance in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. During an interview with Marvel.com, writer Philippe Smith revealed that the new series series will basically pick up right where the last one ended, and we'll also see focus on the relationship between Robbie and Gabe, as well as how the agreement between Robbie and Eli has progressed. But with that being said, because there's so little information on Robbie Reyes at the moment, there's really not a whole lot to offer here. But he was a character that a lot of you guys requested because of the fact that he's going to be showing up in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., so I figured I'd do my best to grab what precious little information we have and bring it to you guys. With that being said, we're going to bring this video to an end, and I will catch you guys later. Peace.